Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite things, and that is hitting a green in regulation. All right, but a green in regulation, in case you don't know what it is, it's basically on a par 4 you hit it in 2, par 5 you hit it in 3, and a par 3 you hit it in 1 onto the green. So basically you have a birdie putt whenever you hit a green in regulation. Right, and nothing, I love hitting irons good. I love hitting irons right at the flag stick. I love the feeling of having a birdie putt. Right? Most everybody does, unless you're a terrible putter. Then it's terrifying when you hit a green because you're like, I'm just going to three putt this now. But that's for a different video altogether. So today we're going to talk about how to make your irons more consistent so you can hit more greens in regulation so you can shoot lower scores. If you don't understand how important a green in regulation is, the typical tour pro will hit 13 greens, get up and down half of the time, and then the other part, they might make a bogey or they might hit more greens. But basically, that's why they always shoot under pars because they typically hit a lot of greens in regulation. We're talking average is 13. So some days they might have 16, some days they might have 10. Right? 10 is usually the higher score. 16 is that 65, 64 number that they tend to fire out there. All right. If you are a person who struggles with greens in regulation, let's say you hit 1 or 2, you're probably in the 90s, possibly the hundreds. All right. And then if you hit 7 or 8, you'll probably drop into the 80s. 70s is going to be around that 10, maybe even that 13 if you're not a great putter. Okay. But greens in regulation equals lower scores. So we have to be good at hitting irons in order to hit those greens in regulation. Now, before I get too far off tangent, because I tend to do that at times, if you can't hit the driver straight, it doesn't really matter how good you are with irons. So I always say that irons depend on your driver. So the two most important clubs for me is a driver and a putter. Okay, so today we're just talking about irons. Hopefully you're a good driver, and now you're going to become a better iron player and hit more greens after you watch this video. If you are brand new to our channel, make sure you subscribe so you see our future videos. If you hit the little bell button right next to the subscribe button, you will see all the notifications of the videos that we post. Usually are on Tuesday and Friday. And then if you give us a thumbs up, it just means you enjoy our content today. It helps you out and it also grows our channel. And if you have any comments, you can leave those down below. So how do we hit more greens in regulation? The first thing you need to address is what typically causes us to lose club face control. So the club determines irons around 75 to 85% of where the ball finishes. So if your club face control is very lacking, it's going to be pretty hard. But the first thing we're going to talk about, what causes us to lose club face control, is that early extension move or that losing our posture in the golf swing. So if you don't know quite what that is, that's when the hips go forward, chest stands up, hands get high, and then when the hands get high, the face usually opens, or you flip it goes closed, or you time it perfectly and it goes straight. Right? That's why it's so hard to hit greens, and that's why you hit 1 or 2 greens, is because that's one of the number one faults that most golfers come in contact with is they lose posture. Okay, we're going to really quickly go through just a few reasons why you might be losing posture, and just a really quick way to try to fix that. Okay, so one of the first things is people tend to start off with posture on the wrong side. It could be just due to a dominant eye thing. So you need to have a little tilt away from the ball, and then when you get to the top of the swing, you need to maintain that spine tilt. So it basically has to stay the same. If it rocks the other way, all right, it could be hip sway, whatever, all right, that is going to a lot of times lead to that early extension, a lot of club face movement, won't hit a lot of greens. The next thing that can lead to early extension is when you swing back, you go to your toes. And so your body's naturally going to stand up to basically try to get you not to fall over. Okay, so when you set up to it, make sure that weight feels like it's right in front of the ankle. Right. The next thing you need to do is when you swing to the top, you got to make sure the weight doesn't go to the toes again. Okay, when you get to the top, you need to feel like the weight goes into the right heel. Okay, and then the hip needs to feel like it actually goes deeper. Okay, and then on the way down, which is the big key, is you need to either feel like your right hip stays back or your chest moves on top of it. Everybody feels something different. Some people are really good with just feeling like their right hip stays back and it helps their chest stay down. Other people struggle with that idea, and so they do better when they feel like their chest actually goes down at the ball. And then finally, something that usually loses can lead to early extension is what the lead shoulder does. So some really good golfers will start to shallow it, but their lead shoulder really climbs. And you can see how it pulls my hips forward. It doesn't allow my hips to rotate out of the way anymore because my lead shoulder is too much climbing. So if you're somebody who can shallow the club, but you struggle with losing posture, when you get to the top, you need to feel like the lead shoulder kind of stays down. It'll help you cover it more and actually help you stabilize the club face. And we'll talk about that a little bit later of the one moment that you should really pay attention to help you hit more greens. So the next thing that you need to pay attention to is your club face at the top of your golf swing, right? Yes, we'd love to see the club face match your spine or be just a little bit up, all right? We don't want your club face to be too closed because when it gets to the top of the swing, it's going to be closed. And this is something that leads to early extension, or it just leads to the thing that we hate the most to see is when the hands get high. So face is closed on the way down, hands tend to lift, and when the hands lift, the face opens up. So basically, there's good golfers who struggle with the face being closed on top, and then they come down, and they naturally fix it by getting it high. That'll also lead, whenever the handle goes that way, the body also wants to go that way. So it leads to a little early extension. Now, if your timing's on, you can hit a lot of greens that way, right? When your timing's off, you can miss a lot of greens that way, okay? It goes both ways. So when you get to the top, you need to really work on feeling like that face matches that left forearm, all right? Because then you can come down and it can be nice and square. You won't struggle with the hands getting high. I've never seen somebody struggle with the hands being low because that usually leads to a closed face, but I've never actually had a lesson where somebody finished with their hands lower unless they started with the posture up here like this, which, of course, that is wrong, okay? So this is where it all comes down to. This is how you hit more greens. This is how you hit more fairways too. It's all pretty relative. You chip better this way, you putt better this way. Right? Things have to match up. So when you come back to the ball, so if you imagine a shaft line right here, when you come back to it, it needs to match it. Okay? If it matches it, it's great. Even if the shaft doesn't have any forward shaft lean, but it matches it, you're going to hit the ball higher. It won't go as far because you're not going to compress it, but the face will tend to be very straight and very, well, I wouldn't say stable, but straight. You'll hit more greens, the ball won't go very far, and it might hit the green and roll over just because you're not compressing it. It won't go as far. It's not as fun. Okay, so you need to work on feeling like the face is stable, bringing it back down to the same line. So this is kind of how I would start. First, I would start with trying to stay in posture. It doesn't have to be perfect. Everything just needs to gradually get better. So you might not do it right away, and it tends to be harder as we swing harder at it. So we're going to start small and start slow. So you're going to take your setup. You're going to work on feeling like that weight goes into that right heel. Hip turns deep. It's not going to slide if it turns deep. It's actually going across your body, right? And then you just practice slowly returning it back to that same line, and it'll get better. And then you just make it a little bit bigger, right? One of the key things is you need to make sure you're trying to feel this and you're doing little reps where you feel it get into it. Now, if your club comes back on that same line, okay, you can be shallow and still hit the ball great. You can be a little steep and still hit the ball great as long as the club returns to that line, because if it returns to that line, it means the face is going to be straight. High, open, low, left. All right, if it comes back to it, so if I come down steep, I might stand up a little bit, but if I magically get it to match that original line that I started with, things are going to be okay. Now, if you start with your hands low, you might try to make that adjustment so it feels like it goes kind of into your belly button and you have enough space, right? It's hard there. Your body's going to tend to stand up. So a lot of those drivers who start with their hands low, you're going to early extend and lose that ball right. So make sure that setup matches what you wanted to achieve in your golf swing. So then you just make it a little bit bigger. So I tend to be a little shallow in my swing, but I tend to match that lineup a lot. I hit a lot of greens in regulation if I can keep the ball in the fairway. Whoa, too close to the net. All right, and then we'll go with the full swing. and it should match right on top of that line. That was a terrible golf swing. Let's try that again. Well, I hope this video helped you out today. I hope you go hit more greens.